Church in Denver, Colorado. We love the big city of Denver. He and the church were thrown onto the national scene during the holidays in 2009 when the Associated Press did a story on the idea that the evangelical church and the preacher could not only be gay affirming, but embrace same-sex marriages. So please welcome Mark Tim. To come out as a gay affirming church, but you got thrown into the scene by the Associated Press. How did that happen, and what changes were made, I guess, right after that?
Well, the outing of the church really happened in July. We were going to be a church plant of another non-denominational church in Denver, and I had been on their staff for 3 years, and let them know right from the very beginning of the interview that my views were probably way left of center for most on this issue for most non-denominational churches. And I asked if there was a position paper. I couldn't find it online, and I was told if you post something like that online, it ends the discussion. And I thought, wow, this is a church like this that wants to have a vigorous discussion about it. So I thought, well, that sounds great, because what we were looking for is this church was doing a multi-site strategy, and so they had one location. They were just starting one downtown. I was asked to be an associate pastor to get the one downtown started with a view to, after 2 years, starting one in our neighborhood, the Highlands area. And I was always open about my views with this, but the conversation never rose to a very high level, because, as you know, it's just incredibly disruptive in a church. But then as I was getting ready to start the new form, the core, where we were going to meet once a month, I said, once again, the only way I'll be able to do this with integrity is as a reconciling church, or whatever phrase you want to use. And again, I was told, well, that shouldn't be a problem. Highlands is kind of a unique area. It's 96% unchurched, a large gay population. And so we started meeting once a month, and then it was in July. And by the way, that wasn't the first card I laid down. I was trying to form a core, and but had never been discreet about my views. It just wasn't a teaching point from up front. And so in July, as we were starting to work on getting our yearlies and we're moving towards going weekly, something started circulating on the email about a position paper that did exist, that I didn't know existed, for the church where I was serving. It was a 9-page document, and my name came up associated with it as being in non-compliance. And so then I read the paper that I was not aware existed, and I completely disagreed with everything about it. I just wished I'd found that out 3 years earlier. And so then when it came up that I was in non-compliance, people started communicating to the mothership that if I was still involved, that they'd withdraw funds, etc. And so at that point, I still felt a very strong calling by God to start a church in our neighborhood, and but knew that we wouldn't be able to do it in this manner, and I didn't want to adversely affect the mothership. So that was where I just had to make the decision that still needed to start this church, and that we would do it as an inclusive church from the beginning, and had to separate ourselves from the sponsoring church. And that was kind of a nerve-wracking time. It seemed very clear and simple to do it, but it was kind of nerve-wracking. And over the next couple months, we lost half of the people that had started forming the core, and we did lose 2/3 of our funding. And the day we were going to sign the lease, we were still told we'd be under the 501c3, covering, because we hadn't done all that paperwork. And the day we went to sign the lease, we found out that they didn't want the liability. So it was just like a scramble, and yet there was the peace that passes all understanding. This was just the right thing to do, and so we just all of a sudden found ourselves in a 45,000 square foot church, right at the epicenter of our community, with about 70 people. And now they were 70, glad to be there people. The real critical juncture, though, was about 8 years ago, when a couple came to me at a church I was pastoring in Boulder, Colorado, and they were ashen. They were just deer in the headlights, and they said that they had two daughters, and I do have permission to tell this story. They have two daughters, and they told me that their daughter Haley, who is now 7, since the time she was 3, had been saying things like, you know, if God made me a boy, why don't I have a penis? And the parents would say, well, you see, a girl, you're a girl. And the little girl would go, you're silly. And this kept going on. And at 3, that's barely verbal, and already sensing that. By age 7, Haley was in counseling, was clinically depressed, and was starting to have suicidal ideation at 7, which is, you know, not only young, but that's obviously pre-sexual. And the parents were at their wits' end, and they said, you know, Haley, we don't know what to do. What can we do? And in a very lucid moment, Haley said, from now on, call me Hal, and talk about he, him, and his, which was remarkable. And the parents said, okay, and realized that night, you know, they lost their daughter, not a child, they lost their daughter. So they were in my office the next day, and they said, you know, what do we do here? You know, from my vast amount of experience working with transgender children, I knew exactly what to do, which was great. And then I looked like a deer in the headlights, mostly for the pain of what they were facing, not like, oh, you know, what are we going to do as a church, but said, how can love look practical here? And they said, well, for one thing, when we come to church, Hal, and it was kind of hard for them, they hadn't been saying this very often. They said, Hal doesn't know where to go to the bathroom because they're marked men's, women, boys, and girls, and none of those really fit. So we always have to scoot out of here because Hal's done. And I said, okay, well, we put our heads together and said, well, we could make a family restroom so anybody could use it. That one, and that went. That wasn't hard. They said, well, there's another thing, is on Wednesday nights we had a community dinner in the Boys and Girls Club, sort of a scouting type thing, and Hallie actually had been in the girls club looking wistfully over at what the boys were doing, because, you know, we were like many, we taught our boys how to survive in the jungle, and the girls how to thrash their way out of a craft shop. And, you know, she was always looking over, and they said, Hallie, Hal wants to go to the boys club. And that was sort of a magnet moment, because this gets more public. And this was a Christian Reformed church, and I mean, just a great church, but not very open on a lot of this stuff. And as we approached the leaders and the kids, it went amazingly well to just put Hal in the boys club. And in their case, it's not that the church had worked through the substantive issues. They just knew that sometimes, in light of what you don't know, you have to act on what you do know. And so love took precedent there. So that was the main thing that really got me going. That was 8 years ago. But it's one thing to have a set of personal convictions. It's another, when in July, to go, we're going to just be an inclusive church from the beginning. Your personal convictions can be adequate, but then when you go, okay, I don't want to lead anybody astray here. I can do no other, but that's how we got started.